The Chremonidean War, a struggle for Greek independence. The Chremonidean War, fought between 267 and 261 BC, was a conflict that pitted the forces of Greek city-states, led by Athens and Sparta, against the might of the Macedonian kingdom under Antigonus II Gonatas. This war unfolded against the backdrop of an era defined by fading Greek independence and the relentless expansion of Macedonian hegemony. Named after Chremonides, an Athenian statesman who spearheaded the resistance, the war was both a desperate bid for liberation and a tragic tale of futility, marked by betrayal, destruction, and the ultimate eclipse of the classical city-states. This article delves deep into the intricate web of causes, events, and consequences of the Chremonidean War, revealing the dark realities faced by those who dared to challenge an empire, ultimately failing to preserve their independence, resulting in Athenian surrender and the rise of Macedonian supremacy. The origins of the Chremonidean War lay in the deep-seated tensions between the Greek city-states and the Macedonian monarchy, which had grown dominant in the decades following the death of Alexander the Great. The successors of Alexander, known as the Diadochi, carved his empire into competing kingdoms, with Macedonia retaining control over much of Greece. By the early 3rd century BC, Antigonus II Gonatas had consolidated power in Macedonia and sought to maintain control over Greece through a combination of military might and strategic alliances. This hegemony, however, was resented by many Greek cities, which yearned for the autonomy they had enjoyed in the classical era. Athens, with its proud democratic tradition, and Sparta, a bastion of oligarchic independence, became natural leaders of the anti-Macedonian resistance. Their cause was bolstered by the involvement of Ptolemaic Egypt, whose ruler Ptolemy II Philadelphus sought to weaken Macedonian influence in the Aegean. The formation of the Chremonidean League, an anti-Macedonian alliance of Greek city-states, marked the formal beginning of the conflict. This alliance was symbolized by the decree of Chremonides, which called for a united Greek front to restore liberty against Macedonian domination. The Chremonidean War was not a single decisive campaign, but rather a series of fragmented engagements and prolonged sieges, characterized by Macedonian dominance on land and Ptolemaic naval superiority. The Chremonidean War was not a single decisive campaign, but rather a series of fragmented engagements and prolonged sieges, characterized by Macedonian dominance on land and Ptolemaic naval superiority. The Chremonidean War was not a single decisive campaign, but rather a series of fragmented engagements and prolonged sieges, characterized by Macedonian dominance on land and Ptolemaic naval superiority. Athens, a shadow of its former imperial glory, became the epicenter of the resistance. The Athenians, inspired by Chremonides' rhetoric, prepared for war by fortifying their city and mobilizing their forces. However, their hopes of a swift victory were dashed when Antigonus launched a campaign of relentless pressure. In 266 BC, Macedonian forces laid siege to Athens. The siege, lasting several years, was a harrowing ordeal for the city's inhabitants. Food supplies dwindled, and famine gripped the population, reducing them to desperation. The Spartans, led by King Arrius Thauletus, attempted to relieve Athens, but their efforts proved futile. In 265 BC, Arrius's forces were decisively defeated near Corinth, leaving Athens isolated and vulnerable. While Athens struggled on land, the Ptolemaic navy sought to challenge Macedonian control of the Aegean Sea. Ptolemy II's fleet, commanded by skilled admirals, engaged in several skirmishes with Macedonian forces. However, these naval engagements failed to provide the decisive victory needed to tip the balance in favor of the Chremonidean League. Sparta, true to its militaristic tradition, refused to capitulate even after the defeat at Corinth. King Arrius, I continued to resist Macedonian advances, but Sparta's limited resources and lack of allies made sustained resistance difficult. Arrius was eventually killed in battle, a blow that marked the beginning of the end for Spartan involvement in the war. By 262 BC, Athens was on the brink of collapse. Starved and battered, the city finally surrendered to Antigonus II Gonatas. The terms of surrender were harsh. The city's walls were demolished, its democratic government was replaced by a pro-Macedonian oligarchy, and a Macedonian garrison was installed in the Piraeus, Athens's vital port. The fall of Athens marked the effective end of the Chremonidean War, Sparta, isolated and weakened, was unable to continue the fight. Ptolemaic Egypt, focused on its own struggles against the Seleucid Empire, withdrew its support, leaving the Greek city-states at the mercy of Macedonian dominance. The Chremonidean War had profound and far-reaching consequences for Greece. The war marked the final nail in the coffin for Athens and Sparta as significant powers in the Greek world. Their defeat and subjugation by Macedonia symbolized the end of the classical era and the dominance of the city-state as a political entity. Antigonus II Gonatas emerged from the war as the unchallenged master of Greece. His victory secured Macedonian hegemony over the region, a status that would persist until the Roman conquest in the 2nd century BC. The war highlighted the growing influence of external powers, particularly Ptolemaic Egypt in Greek affairs. However, the failure of Ptolemy II to provide decisive support to the Chremonidean League underscored the limitations of such alliances. The Chremonidean War epitomized the gradual erosion of Greek independence in the face of Macedonian and later Roman expansion. The ideals of liberty and autonomy, once central to Greek identity, became increasingly hollow in the shadow of foreign domination. The Chremonidean War is a testament to the tragic fate of those who resist overwhelming odds. The Greek city-states, driven by a noble but ultimately doomed desire for freedom, were crushed under the weight of Macedonian power. Their sacrifices, though heroic, served only to delay the inevitable decline of their autonomy. In the end, the Chremonidean War stands as a somber reminder of the fragility of liberty in a world dominated by empires. It is a story of courage and defiance, but also of loss and despair, a dark chapter in the annals of Greek history.